One day I was behind my house, in my garden. The pests had destroyed everything. Tomatoes, peppers, everything. I didn't know what to do. I spent money on pesticides. The pests came back. I spent more on organic. Nothing changed. My soil was worse than before. It was like the industry wanted me to keep spending. Then my uncle came to visit. He stood in front of the dead garden and looked at me. "Why don't you try this?" he asked. 2 tablespoons of Epsom salt. 1 gallon of warm water. Once a week. I looked at him like he was crazy. Salt. That's it. But I tried it. 3 weeks later, the pests were gone. The plants got stronger. My soil started to recover. And then I discovered something the chemical industry buried 41 years ago. A retired postal worker in Indiana used it for 4 decades. A German farmer brought it from Europe 200 years ago. A Purdue University study in 1950 showed results so impressive they mysteriously disappeared from circulation. Today I'm showing you exactly what they hid, why your uncle probably knows about it, and how in 2026, when your soil is more damaged than ever, this is exactly what you need. Stay with me. Let me start with what you're experiencing right now. Your garden fails. So you buy pesticides. The pesticides work temporarily. But the pests come back worse. So you buy stronger pesticides. Then, organic alternatives. Then, fertilizers. You're spending $500 to $1,500 a year on chemicals that are supposed to help you. But here's what's actually happening. Every time you spray synthetic pesticides, you're doing something to your soil that nobody talks about. You're killing the entire biological community that keeps soil alive. Not just the bad insects. Everything. The beneficial bacteria. The earthworms. The mycorrhizal fungi that feed your plant's roots. That underground ecosystem took decades to build. You kill it in one spray. Without it, your soil becomes dead. Dead soil grows weak plants. Weak plants attract pests like a weakness signal. So the pests return in greater numbers because your plants are now vulnerable. So you spray again. This cycle repeats every year, and every year it gets worse. You're not gardening anymore. You're trapped in a system designed to keep you dependent. And the people profiting from that dependence know exactly how this works. They have an entire industry built on that cycle. Pesticide companies. Fertilizer companies. Soil amendment companies. Billions of dollars flowing through a system that needs your garden to stay weak. Now let me tell you about Harold. Harold was a retired postal worker in Millbrook, Indiana. He had a 6th grade education. He wasn't a scientist. He had hands gnarled like tree roots from decades of sorting mail in an unheated rural post office. But every Sunday morning from April through September, for 41 years, Harold did something simple. He mixed 2 tablespoons of 1 cheap white powder into a gallon of warm water. He poured it around the base of his tomatoes. 41 years. His garden produced so much food that it fed his family, his 3 grown children, and the local food pantry. The neighbors thought he was crazy. The county extension office never told him to do it. Nobody was promoting it. He did it because his grandmother, Eliza, taught him during the Dust Bowl years. She had kept 7 children alive on a 1/4 acre of land using this exact method. And she had learned it from a German immigrant named Otto Lindemann who brought it from a village outside Stuttgart where farmers had been using it since the 1800s. The mineral itself was first found in the bitter springs near the English town of Epsom in Surrey in 1618. A farmer noticed his cows wouldn't drink from one particular spring on a hot summer day. He boiled the water. It left a bitter white residue that healed cuts, reduced swelling. And as gardeners would later learn, it did something remarkable to soil and the plants growing in it. That's where the secret started. That's where knowledge was passed down through families, communities, immigrant groups. For generations, ordinary people knew this. Not because they understood the chemistry, but because it worked. Your grandfather probably knew it. Your great-grandmother definitely used it. But somewhere between 1950 and now, that knowledge got buried. Not because it stopped working. It was buried because it became invisible to the people who profit from your dependence. Think about it. A $4 bag of Epsom salt lasts 2 or 3 seasons. There's no patent, no brand name, no marketing budget. No pesticide company makes money when you use it. Compare that to synthetic pesticides. Thousands of dollars in profits, patent protection, marketing budgets in the millions. An entire industry designed to convince you that you need their product. And the extension offices? They take substantial funding from those same chemical companies. So the incentive system is built into everything around you. The message you hear isn't, "Here's what works best." The message is, "Here's what we profit from." And if you've been following that message for the past few years, wondering why you keep spending more money for worse results, now you know why. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed. But it doesn't have to control your garden anymore. In 1947, a soil scientist at Purdue University named Dr. Walter Henning began a 3-year study. He compared pest damage in tomato plots treated with weekly Epsom salt applications against control plots treated only with standard nitrogen fertilizer. The results were published in a bulletin from the Indiana Agricultural Experiment Station in the fall of 1950. According to that bulletin, the Epsom-treated plots experienced an average of 73% less aphid damage, 68% less hornworm damage, and a stunning 81% reduction in blossom end rot. That's not a 10% improvement. That's not a marginal gain. That's transformational results. Henning's bulletin was reprinted exactly once in a small run of about 400 copies. Then it was quietly removed from circulation in 1953. Around the same time, major agricultural chemical companies began significantly increasing their funding to land-grant universities across the Midwest. Whether there's a direct connection between those two events, I'll leave for you to decide. But I will note that Henning himself, in a letter to his daughter dated November 1961, wrote that he had been advised by colleagues that further research into magnesium sulfate would not be a productive use of his career. So he shifted his focus to nitrogen utilization in corn, where, in his own words, the funding was considerably more generous. The bulletin is still there, in the special collections of the Purdue Agricultural Library. A researcher named Marjorie Vance tracked it down in 2003 while writing her master's thesis. But Henning was not alone. What Marjorie discovered was that the same thing happened at 3 other universities. Similar studies were conducted at Ohio State in 1952, the University of Wisconsin in 1955, Cornell in 1958. Every single one showed dramatic reductions in pest pressure, dramatic increases in yield. And every single one was either never published in an obscure journal, or actively withdrawn shortly after it appeared. The Wisconsin study was the most damning. It was conducted by a graduate student named Theodore Kowalczyk under the supervision of Dr. Eleanor Bishop. His 3-year study ran from May 1955 through October 1957. It tracked pest populations on 12 different vegetable crops across 40 separate test plots. What he recorded was almost hard to believe. Cabbage moths showed an almost complete avoidance of cabbage plants treated with weekly Epsom applications. Kowalczyk recorded an average of 0.3 moth eggs per square foot of leaf on treated plants, compared to 37.8 eggs per square foot on untreated plants. That's not a typo. That's a difference of more than 2 orders of magnitude. But Kowalczyk's dissertation was never published. He took a job with an agricultural chemical company in Delaware in the spring of 1958. According to a brief and bitter interview he gave to a regional gardening magazine in 1979, he was told upon being hired that his dissertation research would not be discussed publicly, and that any further work on magnesium sulfate would be considered a violation of his employment contract. He spent the rest of his career developing synthetic pesticides. He died in 1994. And here's the part that stopped me cold. When his daughter cleaned out his attic some years later, she found a single-bound copy of his dissertation in a cardboard box. In his own handwriting, marked in heavy black marker with one word, roots. She donated it to the Wisconsin State Historical Society, where it remains for any researcher who knows to ask for it. A man who spent 40 years building synthetic pesticides kept the one study that pointed the other way hidden in his attic in a box labeled with a word for the thing that holds a plant to the earth. Now let me explain how this actually works. When you pour that solution around the base of your tomato plant, something specific happens. The magnesium sulfate dissolves into its component ions. Positively charged magnesium, negatively charged sulfate. These are immediately available to plant roots in a way that magnesium locked up in solid soil minerals is not. Most American garden soils, especially in the eastern half of the country, are chronically short on available magnesium. Even when the total magnesium is plenty, because it's bound up in clay and released only slowly. But here's the trap. That problem is made dramatically worse by high potassium fertilizers. Which is to say, almost any commercial synthetic fertilizer. Because potassium and magnesium compete for uptake at the root. When potassium is overabundant, magnesium uptake is suppressed even when adequate magnesium is technically present. So you get a paradox that has frustrated soil scientists for decades. The very fertilizers you use to make your plants grow are simultaneously starving them of the magnesium they need. The Epsom solution bypasses this entirely. It delivers magnesium straight to the root zone in a form that's instantly available no matter what else is happening in the soil. And the sulfur matters just as much, though it gets less attention. Sulfur builds certain amino acids, cysteine and methionine, the building blocks of plant proteins. It powers the same defensive compounds that Kowalczyk identified in his plants. American soils have grown steadily more sulfur deficient over the past 50 years. And the reason is something almost nobody connects to their garden. The Clean Air Act amendments of 1970 and 1990 dramatically reduced sulfur dioxide from coal plants. That was an environmental triumph. It ended acid rain. It saved countless lakes and forests. But it had a side effect. The free sulfur that used to fall on our soil with every rainstorm as dilute sulfuric acid simply doesn't fall anymore. Your soil lost a free nutrient source that had been feeding it for generations. Epsom salt provides exactly the sulfur the rain no longer brings, in exactly the form plants can use. So you're not doing something exotic or strange. You're restoring a balance that used to maintain itself through processes in the sky that no longer operate. You're giving your plants two essential nutrients they cannot reliably get any other practical way. And that's exactly why it works in 2026 better than it did in 1950. Your soil is more depleted. Your needs are more urgent. Your willingness to listen is finally there because you're tired of spending money on failure. The knowledge was always real. Now the desperation to use it is finally real too. Here's the protocol, and the details matter. The basic ratio is 2 tablespoons of Epsom salt to 1 gallon of warm water. Tablespoons, not teaspoons. This trips people up constantly. A teaspoon recipe delivers only a third of what you need. Warm the water to about 90 degrees. Warm to the touch, but not hot. Roughly cooled bath water. Stir with a wooden or plastic spoon, never metal. Metal can react with the sulfate ions and cut the effectiveness. That's a detail Otto Lindemann reportedly insisted on, and Harold followed for 4 decades. Stir until the water goes from cloudy to crystal clear, about 30 seconds. Pour it directly at the base of each plant into the soil within about 6 inches of the main stem where the feeder roots are. Do not pour it on the leaves. At this concentration, foliar application can burn them. Apply within 4 hours of mixing because the solution starts losing strength as it sits. Apply in early morning before 8 a.m. when the soil is cool and the solution penetrates before evaporation. For mature tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants, about 1 full cup per plant once a week. For brassicas, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower use 3/4 cup twice a week. Smaller and leafy plants get about half a cup once a week. Now here's the timeline so you understand what to expect. By week 3 of applications, you'll start seeing changes with your own eyes. The leaves will be darker, more vibrant green because chlorophyll requires magnesium. The stems will be thicker and sturdier because the extra sulfur builds structural proteins. By month 1, the flowers will be larger and more numerous. By month 3, the pests will be noticeably fewer. Not gone, Nothing short of chemical warfare makes pests vanish entirely, but dropped to a level you can manage by hand. The yield is the part that sounds like an exaggeration until you see it. Henning's 1950 bulletin reported average yield increases of 43% for tomatoes, 38% for peppers, and 51% for summer squash. More recent informal trials by master gardeners have reported similar numbers. One Iowa master gardener documented a 62% increase in tomato yield in 2009 after switching to weekly Epsom applications. The fruit itself is larger, denser, and more flavorful because the extra magnesium and sulfur support the sugars and organic acids that give vegetables their taste. A tomato grown this way carries a measurably higher Brix reading, higher dissolved sugar content, and higher concentrations of lycopene, the red antioxidant pigment linked in study after study to better health. Now do the math on what you're actually saving. If you spend $800 per year on pesticides and fertilizers, and you cut that by 80% through this method, you save $640 this year. The Epsom salt costs $4. You pay for itself in less than a week. And that's not even counting the value of the soil you're rebuilding. A living soil. A productive soil. A soil that works for you instead of against you. That's your action this Sunday. 2 tablespoons. 1 gallon. Once a week. That's it. Let me ask you something. How much money have you spent trying to fix a garden that the system was designed to keep you dependent on? Hundreds. Thousands. And how much of that money actually solved the problem? Be honest with yourself. Here's what I know. Your uncle probably knows about this. Or your grandmother knew. They just never told you because they assumed you'd figure it out. Or they did tell you and you didn't believe them because a $4 solution seemed too simple. This Sunday, before you buy another spray, before you add another synthetic fertilizer, try this. 2 tablespoons. 1 gallon. Warm water. Once a week. Then tell me in the comments what state you garden in and what your grandparents grew. Because those stories matter. They're how I find the next buried knowledge to track down. And if this gave you back something that should never have been taken from you, control over your own soil, independence from a system designed to keep you weak, subscribe and stay with us. Because there's a whole community here recovering what our grandparents knew and our parents lost. Real knowledge. Real results. Real freedom from dependence. Do it this Sunday. Watch what happens by August. And tell me,